What is going on, everybody? It's your boy GS Luke here for another one of these quote unquote mega live streams where we're going to go through the entire board, whether it's for the John Deere or the LIV Golf Invitational. So sit back, crack open a drink. It's the weekend. Let's have some fun. And of course, let's get ready to make some money here on Saturday. So, like I said before, we'll just go through the format again. I'm going to start with the John Deere Classic, going to go through the Showdown slate and then prize picks, and then do the same exact thing for the LIV Golf board. So if you have any questions with each section that we're in, feel free to go ahead and toss them down in the comments. And first off, I'll just say welcome to anybody in there in the live chat. Hopefully you're having a solid start to your week, a solid Friday night, and in general, having a pretty solid week in DFS. I mean, the 6 of 6 rate was right around 5 to 6%, depending on what contest you were in. And I ended up having 21 out of 156 of 6 lineups. So, right around like 14.5% when it came to my personal player pool, which was well above the field average. But just no JT Poston. It's the one week I didn't play the guy. He's one of my favorite players on tour. So I was telling the guys down in Discord that I had a really hard time rooting against him, but I'm glad to see him out there in first place. He's a really good dude and somebody who doesn't act bigger than he is. Will be more than willing to interact with the community. And like I said, an overall good guy. So we already have Kevin down there in chat. So first off, what's going on, Kevin? And he says hit the like button, which I could not agree anymore. Absolutely want to go out there and hit that like button, get the ratings up on this video. Do not want to hate that at all. And Jeff Oswald said one of my lineups was 26 under par today and didn't cash. 37 under par, took it down. What a day. Yeah, man. I obviously don't want to, pat my back on the shoulder too much. But I called the birdie fest, right? I mean, the conditions were perfect for it. On prize picks, they got absolutely slaughtered today. I went 13-2-2 myself on prize picks, but there were other people out there that went like 9-0. You had 14-0 from one of the influencers that I follow for golf. It was a birdie fest beyond birdie fest. And obviously on Showdown, like you said, you had to have like 37 under par to win some of these GPPs. But even more than that on prize picks, you literally could have taken any prop on the over and hit today. It was an interesting slate. So with that being said, let's talk about what we saw today, which, like we have just alluded to, was absolute fireworks. A scoring average of 1.85 under par. And with similar wind conditions expected here for Saturday, I would expect this average to only improve. And the main reason for that is quality of field, right? We've had the cut. A lot of those lower tier players, the people that weren't playing so well over the first 2 days, have been cut out of the field. We don't have to worry about them anymore. So the fact that it played to nearly 2 strokes under par, I might legitimately expect like a 2.5, 3 strokes under par here for the third round. So on moving day, you're going to see some nuclear low scores. And though we haven't seen anything close to a 60 sniffed, perhaps over the weekend we see that because the wind conditions are going to be primed for it. They should have receptive greens because you had a lot of humidity come through the area. And like I mentioned yesterday, pretty much every hole but hole number 9 should play under par. And today, a lot more of them were significantly under par. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that played over par. Tomorrow, with the strengthened field, like with a lot of those lower tier players cut out, I would expect pretty much every single hole, maybe except for 7 and 9, depending on setup, to play well under par. So again, the scoring average, probably closer to 2.5 to 3 under par. And you'll see that reflected with the projections. I know I alluded to the weather, but we'll go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. You're going to have single digits when it comes to the sustained winds for the entire day. 2 to 7 miles an hour. And when it comes to the wind gusts, I mean, they're literally non-existent, right? You can see it's non-existent up until 9 a.m. And then towards midday, you have like a 1 mile an hour difference between the quote unquote wind gusts and then the sustained winds. So I would expect conditions to be even more pristine than what we saw for Friday, where it was pretty flat, right? Early in the morning, there were a few wind gusts, especially with the guys that teed off super early there. But throughout the day, very similar conditions to what we're going to see here on Saturday. So with that being said, am I targeting one way versus the other? The obvious answer, and if you've been here for quite some time, is if we have a flat weather day, of course I am. I'm looking at the guys in the morning, right? The guys in the morning wave are dealing with the most pristine greens, but even more than that, are dealing with more receptive greens. You always have a little bit more humidity in the air in the mornings, but even more importantly, there's that dew that's on the ground, right? That dampness that you have when you're playing out there at 7 to 8 a.m. And when you're playing on greens like that, like I'm sure a lot of you out there have before, it's really easy to stick it close. I mean, you're like throwing darts out there. And if you're a tour player that just made the cut this week, like a few guys that we're going to be targeting here in a second, it's going to be prime conditions to start 3 or 4 under par through your first 5 or 6 holes. And to win in Showdown tomorrow, you're probably going to have that player. So we'll obviously be focusing on the guys that are teeing off close to like 7:30 to 8 a.m. Eastern, well, I should say Central Time over there in Silvis, Illinois. But outside of that, gonna play it relatively flat, right? Like the guys that are teeing off at like 10 to 11 a.m., I don't expect them to have an advantage over the guys teeing off in the afternoon because, frankly, they're going to have slightly easier greens, right? They might be a little bit easier to hold because they're not as firm and fast as the guys that are teeing off a few hours later. But you're also talking about a higher quality of player or guys that are at least in better form, right? Teeing off in the afternoon wave. So with the slight advantage that the guys teeing off a little bit earlier might have, I think, at least per my modeling, it's offset by their recent form that they've had over the weeks there. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of weather. We'll hop over to the player pool side now, and it's going to look a little bit different, guys. So if you haven't heard already, I have increased the price of my Patreon. It's in an attempt to protect my picks. So obviously, I have 2,000 subscribers now. When I came out with the Patreon, I had like literally 20. I was getting like 5 views on my videos. So when I was putting out this content, it wasn't swaying ownership. It wasn't impacting the people that were using the picks. But over time, I've started to get a lot more followers. So as a result, I'm going to have to start to protect the picks. And the way that I'm doing that is I'm going to be exiting out a lot of the ownership numbers, in fact, all of them on the board. And then for my player pool, I'm only going to be targeting or at least showing the guys that I'm talking up in the video. So that's just going to be something going forward. Obviously, the people that are in the Patreon understand why I'm doing this. It's to make the Patreon a little bit more valuable, right? Obviously, if you're in there, you're buying the picks, you're investing into me as a business. I want to give back to you, right? And if I'm mentioning a guy in the Patreon, and this is something I'll be talking up with all my people in there, is there's going to be a lot of these low-owned players that I frankly just don't want to spill the beans on. I mean, I don't want to be deceiving out here by any means, right? But there's certain plays in the board that I'm just not going to talk up because I'm going to leave them to my Patreon people. So just understand that going forward. That's going to be the status quo here. That's what we're going to be doing with our content. Obviously, you're still going to be getting quality plays, but instead of talking about everyone in my player pool, which honestly, guys, that was generous, right? The fact I was going through everyone I was playing for every single slate, I mean, people started to leverage that against me. I started to notice that in contests. And frankly, I don't want to deal with that anymore. So that's what we're going with going forward. Understand that's why a lot of this is blacked out. If you are looking for direct access to the projections, you know where to find them. It's on my Patreon page. It is $10 a month now for access to that. And you get access to my entire player pool, the entire projected ownership. And of course, we're going to be doing live streams after my live streams here on YouTube, where I'm breaking down everything in full detail to my guys there on Discord. So with obviously the lack of information you're getting here on YouTube, there's an abundance of wealth available there on Patreon. But more importantly, information that's not tainted because 10,000 people or 1,000 people that watch my videos have seen it and now know how to react to it, right? Like, for example, guys, last weekend, Parbajan, Michael Thorbornson, and what was his name? Conrad Schindler. I was the only person in like human history that was playing those 3 players. And last week, I did a live stream on it, got over 1,000 views, and in the contest, they were like 4 to 5% owned. I can almost guarantee you that people didn't play them on their own volition, right? They went out there, they saw my video, and they played them because of that. It was just kind of an eye-opener to me where, I'm putting out these great plays. It's great to give them to the community, but when I'm trying to win money playing DFS, and of course, the people that subscribe to my Patreon, even more importantly, right, are trying to win DFS, it's not as effective when, again, 1,000 people see that information. So just understand why I'm doing this. Of course, just incentivizing the work that I'm doing, it has that impact too. And I think I'm worth a lot more than $1 a month. So just wanted to give that spiel there. Just wanted to give you guys the thought process behind there and to understand why a lot of it's blacked out now. So go ahead and catch up on chat, see what we've got. Jack Fisher says, Denny McCarthy should have been at least 3 shots better today. I agree. I absolutely love him tomorrow. You can see he's one of the guys we'll talk up here in a second. Max House says, great call on Grillo and McNeely. Absolutely got screwed by somebody withdrawing. Yeah, me too, man. I had 21 6 of 6s, and I shouldn't have done this analysis if Pendrith didn't withdraw and he made the cut, right? So that's 2 stipulations, right? That he didn't withdraw and he made the cut, but had 45 6 of 6s. Just Annoying, dude. I'm right there with you, Max. And I know other people withdrew. You had Sloan that withdrew, Tyler Duncan that withdrew, and Jason Day. So yeah, it was a bad week when it came to that. Michael Smith says, you want to be $100 today. Love the content. Yeah, dude, Price Picks. I should have mentioned that, guys. Price Picks was absolutely fucking fire today, guys. 13, 2-2. I hope you guys cashed out on that front. So obviously Michael was able to do so. That was unbelievable. Sway McThunder says that hole 9 was a killer for the birdie free round. Yeah, hole 9 is an absolutely brute of a hole. It's about 500 yards. It's got really lush rough to the left and the right side. Not a surprise, Sway. When you're watching your guys on a leaderboard, got to pay extra attention when it comes to those hole number 9 stuff. That's for sure. Jeff Oswald says, not a big fan of 150 entries for the $15 or the 8K entry field on GPP. Sick of these sharks. Should be a 20 max. I mean, the only answer to that, Jeff, is to become one of the sharks, right? To be somebody that's entering 150 lineups. There's plenty of lineup optimizers out there, but more importantly, just make sure you're entering a contest that you can actually max. Like, I won't enter the $20 GPP with 150 entries because I'm not comfortable putting $3,000 into every single week. I'm a lot more comfortable putting in about $750. So, right, I'll enter the $5 GPP. So maybe it's contest selection for you, Jeff. Maybe you just want to go out there, pick better contests because you don't want to enter like 20 lineups into a 150 entry contest because, like you said, those sharks are going to eat you alive, right? They have a lot more permutations and combinations, and they're only playing contests they can afford, right? They can play that because they have $20,000, $30,000 bankrolls. That's the difference there. So yeah, I agree. You don't want to be competing against them unless you can match their entries. So if you can't max it, go down to a smaller contest. That's what I would definitely agree on. Frank Livingston says, back again, Luke. What's going on? Glad to have you in here in the live chat. We've got Young who says it was overdue, TBH. I'm assuming that's about the price increase. Yeah, I agree, man. I've been talking about it for quite some time, and yeah, it was overdue, that's for sure. Phil says Smotherman was hurtful. I agree. I had plenty of him too, but don't go overboard, right? I had 35%, so I went overboard on Smotherman this week. I love the guy. I think he's completely underrated. Didn't kill me all that much, though. I still have plenty of 6 of 6s. And Rush Shaw says, what size player pool is optimal for a 3 max? So if we're going with a 3 max, maybe like 10, 11 players at the very most. You want a very constricted player pool. I mean, I would have at least 2, maybe 3 guys that I have across all 3 lineups. You want to have a core, that's for sure, of at least 2 to 3 players. Maybe the guys down low in the 6K range, you scatter shot across all 3 lineups, but certainly be mixing in, let's say 2 to 3 guys up top, 2 to 3 guys in that 8 to 9K range, and then scatter shot that 6K range. That's what I would do for a 3 max. You definitely want to have a relatively condensed player pool. So if you've gone through the comments, let's hop into this player pool, boys. So let's talk about what we expect for the round 3 of the John Deere. And I got myself some whiskey this time around. It's a whiskey on the rocks. It's in a wine glass. Just didn't have any whiskey glasses available, so we put it in the next best thing, which is the wine glass for us this day. But shitty whiskey aside, right? Let's talk about our favorite plays. And what I did for this, guys, it's not like I randomly picked people out of my player pool to talk up. These are some of my favorite plays on the board, right? So these are guys I'm going to have probably 15, maybe even 20% plus of. The guys up top, right, 35, probably the 40% of. So first off, Denny McCarthy, somebody hit the nail on the head before. He could have been so much better today, and he had one of the best rounds of the tournament. His ball striking has been there for the last 2 to 3 months, and that's really what's propelled him to the next level. He's always been a world-class putter, and at a Birdie Fest, the one thing I'll say about the greens here is they're unbelievably easy to read. I mean, the undulations aren't very subtle. You're not going to have many double breakers, and on top of that, they don't have that much slope to them, which means elite putters like McCarthy, who's pretty much going to hit his line every single time, is going to just make an unbelievable amount of putts because he's that solid with his stroke. So at $10,200, given the ball striking we've seen, I think he not only has an incredible floor, but like somebody mentioned before, I mean, he could have shot 9, 10 under par today. I mean, that was not out of range for Denny McCarthy. And to this point, he has not carried himself with the putter. I mean, he's had a relatively balanced contribution on pretty much all shots gained category. So at $10,200, he was my number 1 model ranked play going into the week. Not a surprise that I'm getting back to him. Now, is he going to be popular, right? You could see that it's exited out over here. The answer is yes. Now, I'm not going to give you the exact number If you'd like the projection on it, again, join the Patreon. I'm sorry, guys, I got to be a sellout on this, right? It's the first day we're doing this, but it's on the Patreon. He's going to be chalk. He's going to be chalk. So he's one of the few pieces that I am willing to eat on this slate. And you guys know I hate myself some chalk. Sahith Theegala, I don't think it's the worst play. So I don't want to spoil the beans on Sahith Theegala, but I think he's a pretty solid option there. Maverick McNeely, I talked about him yesterday. Obviously, had the ceiling round today, but I think that's going to continue. He clearly has the magic broomstick. We saw that on day one, and today, the major X factor was the ball striking. He finally started to hit greens, and that's why he shot whatever it was, like 6 to 7 under par. Much like a Denny McCarthy, he still bogeyed on the day. He still could have easily shot 3 to 4 shots better. So for McCarthy and for guys like McNeely, it's all about the putting for me. This is a birdie fest. This is a just putting contest, right? An effing putting contest, as John Rahm would say in the past. So for McNeely, I'm willing to get there. And at this point in Showdown, I mean, you'll have guys that have, ceiling performances like McNeely. I don't have them projected through the roof. I mean, I have them at relatively high ownership, but not something like we have on Denny McCarthy, who's, I would say he's higher than 30% owned here for next round, right? McNeely, I'll give you a little taste. He's in the 20s when it comes to projected ownership. So at $9,400, I do like getting to him. I expect the putting to continue. And the ball striking that we saw today obviously led to a solid round, and he could improve upon that. He was far from flawless out there. Nick Hardy, one of the guys I like that's teeing off early. He's at $9,100. And to this point, the approach play has been there. The issue has been around the green. He hasn't been that accurate off the tee. And for somebody to have a ceiling round around this golf course, they are certainly going to have to hit fairways. So Nick Hardy is not a safe play on the slate. But at the same time, I like his upside. We've seen it the last few weeks, obviously, with some top 25 finishes. Has started to look like a lot more consistent player of late. And the price tag at $9,100 is damn attractive too. So I like getting to him there, that's for sure. I'm getting to some Brendan Todd. Brendan Todd is number 2 in my modeling. So the metrics, loved him going into the week. And you've probably noticed a recurring theme here. The one odd man out might be Nick Hardy, but solid putters, right? McNeely, one of the best putters on tour. McCarthy, the best putter on tour. And then somebody like Brendan Todd, who's obviously a short game specialist. So I like him at $8,300. He loves himself some bent grass, and the ball striking to this point, especially here on Friday, was among the best that we had in the field. Moving on a little bit further, we've got Kevin Streelman at $7,900, and he's somebody who can be streaky with that flat stick. The reason why I like getting there is the ball striking has been half decent. He's been putting it close enough, or he's been making enough birdies to this point. The real X factor is going to be whether he makes those 20 to 25 footers, and as evidenced by his last 2 rounds at the Travelers, he's more than capable of finding that spike putter. I mean, I just remember on Sunday, we played him on Showdown. He was making plenty of these like 20 to 30 foot putts. He's somebody who can do that from time to time. And for Showdown purposes, those are the exact type of players that I like getting to, that can get that spike putter. I mean, from all other categories, he doesn't really have that much upside, right? He's not going to gain 5 strokes off the tee. Approach, he can get hot. I'll give him that, right? Kevin Streelman's a pretty solid iron player, but it's the majority going to be with the irons and then with the putter. Like I'm saying, he's got to find that hot flat stick. And in Showdown purposes, one of the guys I get to a lot more often than most. We'll catch up on chat, see what's going on down below. We've got Jack who says, do you think it would help for the 3-ball or 2-ball markets? I do think so, especially when it comes to like projecting players. Now, the DFS side, when it comes to game theory and whatnot, that's not going to apply to that. But on the betting side, I think there's definitely things you can take away from it. Everyday Fantasy says, been asking about your stuff. We'll be joining today. Yeah, link down in the description, by the way. So if you're looking to join, there is a link down below. It's $10 a month, right, guys? It's more expensive than before, right? It was $1 before. Guys, there's sites that are $80 a month, right? I'm not going to call them out. $80 a month for DFS advice. They better be winning you thousands of dollars like every slate if they're making you pay that much, right? $10 a month. We do a good amount of winning around here. I think it's a pretty good value. So that's what I'll say about that. Glad to have you Everyday Fantasy. Frank says, Luke, how much would it cost? We wanted your VIP exclusive entries and wanted 101 golf education. Hey, well, one thing I'll say, dude, I give all of my entries on my Patreon, and I give one-on-one advice. If anyone ever messages me, wants advice, wants help actually when they're making their lineups, I'll sit down with them. So that's not an extra charge, Frank. If you join the Patreon, that is included free of charge. That's something that I'm willing to do for anybody. And I've had plenty of people reach out for that advice to this point. So we definitely recommend getting in there. Big Tech says, should have listened to you more when I faded everybody up top, but Webb, fuck him, all those birdies and can't make a cut. Going to join right now, definitely worth the 10 in my opinion. Couldn't have said it better myself, right? You got to fade that donkey chalk. And for Webb Simpson, obviously I talked him up as a fade, but Adam Hadwin didn't end up making the cut. Jason Day obviously withdrew. I don't want to give myself a pat on the back for that. But even Sahith Theegala, right? He hardly made it through the cut there. He shot 3 under par. Definitely weak to fade the top. So glad that it worked out for you, Big Tex. Obviously with Webb Simpson is what it is. That's a hard one. He should have played well here in theory. It was just a fade for me because he was 30% owned. He was just ridiculously high owned, which is going to happen from time to time. We got Jeff Oswald who says, love watching the ESPN Plus feed for the featured hole. I agree. Get to see all the players and you don't know who comes through on the par 3. How about Thompson's beard? Yeah, Thompson looks like Popeye out there. He looks like Santa Claus. He's really letting it grow out at this point. But did you see the Patrick Rogers hole-in-one? Was a hell of a shot today. Hopefully you guys were able to see that on ESPN Plus. And they didn't spoil it this time. They didn't do the whole Nick Faldo, like, oh, look at this. Something special is about to happen. And it's on a par 3 and it's going to be a hole-in-one. The announcer, I looked at it after the fact. He was excited when he brought up the hole, but he really didn't sell it. I was just as surprised as anybody when I saw Patrick Rogers make the hole-in-one, which, by the way, guys, Patrick Rogers has like 8 birdies on his card. He has an eagle and a hole-in-one. He's one of the top 5 scorers on the slate at this point. I mean, let's go. I had 40% Patrick Rogers this week, and he's doing it in pure Patrick Rogers fashion. He's making 40-foot putts. He's making eagles as a chip in. He's making hole-in-ones. I mean, he's just he's a tilt to fade, that's for sure. I'll just say that much, because Patrick Rogers is either going to miss the cut by 6 strokes and I'm like, oh, okay, makes sense why we faded him this week, or he's going to do what he's doing this week and absolutely just piss you the fuck off because he's making those 40-foot putts. He's making those eagles, those hole-in-ones. So, yeah, man, I agree. It was, first off, Thompson's beard was absolutely great, but hopefully you guys saw that hole-in-one. It was on the featured holes there, and they saw it on ESPN Plus. It was a heck of a golf shot. So we got, Hank says, and by VIP, I meant like all of your entries and the way you play them. Yeah, dude, that's on Discord, actually. So if you join the Patreon, I put all of my plays down in the Discord. And a lot of people ask me how I'm playing them. They'll be like, hey, you putting them in like, what combinations for your 3 and 4 like flex plays? Are you putting in any power plays for 2 and 3 leggers, which I'll do from time to time? If you join the Patreon, you get all of that. That's for sure. So that's not an extra charge. That's for sure. Nick Tech says they didn't help you win, by the way. 80 for nothing. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about, Big Tex. I'm not going to call them out, but you know exactly who I'm talking about, Big Tex. That's for sure. Jack says your price is still too low, in my opinion, worth more than it. While I agree, Jack, I still want to be a solid value because I will be doing some NFL stuff. So surprised if you haven't seen my NFL content, by the way. I'm an NFL content creator. You can go back. I've been covering shit the whole NFL season last year. We'll be doing that going into next year too. That's going to be $10 a month for my NFL stuff. There's not going to be quite as much content for NFL because I am a golf content creator, but I use my database approach for the NFL too. And I've actually been playing NFL fantasy a lot longer than golf fantasy, but so is everybody else, right? Everybody else is just as sharp as me at this point. So I have a pretty solid process when it comes to NFL. It's mostly projection based, just all data based, but everyone's sharp in NFL, that's for sure. So expect that to come. That'll be coming out, Jack. You got Phil says Seifert missed a 5-foot birdie on 9 to miss the cut. Would have had 8 more 6 of 6s. Oof, Phil. Cheers to that, brother. That sucks, dude. That's hey, they call it Cut Sweat Friday for a reason. Sometimes it's good for you. Sometimes it's shitty for that. So cheers to that, bro. That sucks, man. You got Jack, who says, don't make me wrong, though. I love the price, though. Thanks, Luke. Hey, man, exactly, dude. It's low for you, right? Take advantage of it. That's for sure. Hank says, Luke, there are other membership options. Let's just say I don't want to pay monthly. Are there custom options? Might be able to figure something out, Frank. Go ahead and DM me on Twitter. Might be able to do something on like a one-time basis, get you a month-long membership, a year-long membership. And Jeff says, I feel like Charles Howell is primed for tomorrow. The course is like his backyard. Now, I completely agree with that sentiment. So I don't want to give away whether I'm playing him or not. So I'm not going to tell you, but I'll just say I think he's a decent player there. I'll say that much for you, boss man. I think you could do a whole lot worse than CH3. Let's hop back into this player pool. Again, we still have to cover the LIV Tour. We still have to cover prize picks. My Lord, we're taking a little bit too much time here, but hey, we'll get along to it. I don't have anywhere to get to at this point. We got David Lipsky, by the way, who looked beautiful today, just hitting almost every fairway, hitting almost every single green. He wasn't sticking it to like 5 to 10 feet. He had a lot of his iron shots to like 30 or 40 feet, but to me, that screams potential, right? Obviously he was a little bit lucky with the flat stick, has been to this point, but so has Maverick McNeely. And that's kind of what I'm going with here. Typically, I hate people that have it hot with the flat stick. A lot of times we see regression in that category, but at a birdie fest, that's kind of what I'm looking for, right? You want somebody to get hot with the putter. That's how you shoot 7 to 8 under par. That's how you do what Maverick McNeely did today. That's how you do what JT Poston has done over the first 2 rounds, is get hot with that putter. Make all your 7 to maybe 15-foot putts. So Lipsky, maybe he hits a few closer iron shots today. I mean, if he replicates what he did here on Friday, I think all of us would be pretty happy with it. We'd be pretty satisfied there. Steven Yeager hardly made the cut, but his iron play has been a lot better this week than what we're used to seeing. So even though the results haven't necessarily reflected that, is still, I believe, 3 under par, hardly made the cut. I think he has quite a bit of upside. Rory Sabatini loves himself a short golf course, and kind of like somebody like Steven Yeager, hasn't really shown his potential to this point. The shots gained metrics, the game looks a lot better than what he's gotten out of it. So somebody that I'm expecting to have a little bit of a bounce back. Michael Thompson also, I believe he made the cut either by 1 stroke or directly on the cut line at $6,900. I think you could do a whole lot worse than him. He loves short golf courses. He had a top 5 finish at a comp course I'm looking at, which was TPC Twin Cities, and very streaky putter. You can see he gains on bent grass. So if there's one surface you want to take him on, it's the surface that we have this week. And like I said, he's all about those short golf courses. And the one guy down low I'm going to give you, and I'll admit there's like 3 or 4 guys down low that I'm playing this week, but the one I'm going to give you is Curtis Thompson, who, first off, a West Palm Beach boy. He's down from down here in South Florida. So first off, he's a homie of mine down here. I've actually played golf with Curtis Thompson before, but $6,100, a ball striker, played awesome golf today, and you need the flat stick from him. That's one thing that he certainly has to flip for him to have that ceiling performance, but it's the John Deere Classic. Maybe he hits it to 5 to 6 feet all day. Doesn't have to really rely on that putter. So I think you could do a whole lot worse than Curtis Thompson. He's a high upside ball striker who can certainly be streaky. I mean, before this week, he'd missed like 4 or 5 straight cuts, and they were really ugly missed cuts. This week, though, the ball striking is on point. Just obviously the putter can be a liability from time to time. That's what you saw for the last 4 to 5 starts. That's why he missed so many cuts in a row. But the ball striking upside is there, and it's way higher than everyone else. I mean, the next comparable ball striker to a Curtis Thompson, I mean, realistically, let me show you the next highest price guy. It would be Emiliano Grillo here at $7,500. So, the next best ball striker is down here at $6,100. Just obviously the putter is not really there, but neither is for Grillo, right? And Grillo is $7,500, and Grillo is going to be extremely chalky tomorrow. You can see he loses on bent grass. Yeah. So does Curtis Thompson. Sure, it's 1.8 strokes per round, but he also has like 8 rounds on bent grass, right? So how much are we going to really look into that sample size? So, if I'm going to get the cheap Emiliano Grillo, somebody who's like 8 times less owned, has the same type of ball striking numbers, and who's also $1,400 cheaper, I'm going to make that pivot all day. So that's why I'm taking Curtis Thompson. We'll go ahead and catch up on the Showdown questions before we hop into the prize picks board. See what we've got. We've got Russ, who says, is Poston super, super chalk? Great question. I won't give you the exact number, but yes, he's nearly 40% owned in my projections. So he's going to be super mega chalk there. I would fade it. I guess that's an important thing to talk about here. I'd be fading JT Poston. I'll talk about a few other important fades. We got Svensson's going to be like 20-25% owned. I would certainly fade him. Goddard's going to be a lot more popular than he should be. I'm probably fading him. And that shouldn't be a surprise, guys. If you've seen my Showdown content, I'm all about fading the donkey chalk and then playing those low-owned pivots. The guys that usually didn't play the best the day before, but, have the upside. Historically, are birdie or better percentage players, guys that are aggressive, will take aims at pins. That's what I'm looking for in Showdown. But specifically this week, as you've probably figured out by some of the targets here, it's all about putting, right? Especially up top. McCarthy, Maverick McNeely. I mean, even Nick Hardy can get hot with the putter, but Brendan Todd, Kevin Streelman, David Lipsky, all of these players have been hot with the flat stick to this point and love bent grass. So that's what I'm looking at here for the third round. And obviously, again, if you're looking for the full player pool, the entire set of ownership and whatnot, make sure to go ahead and check out the Patreon page. It is posted on there. We're going to go ahead and hop over to the prize pick side now and talk about my favorite props on the board. So let me go ahead and share my screen, bring up the prize picks board, and take a swig of this whiskey before we hop into the board. Alrighty, so what we'll do here is we're going to go category by category and talk about my favorite props. And frankly, the board for the PGA today is not my favorite. They have changed up the board completely with birdies. They changed it with greens. They changed it with fairways. Everything has been bumped up. So yesterday, I mentioned there was at least maybe, a 3/4 or maybe even an entire birdie difference between where I had players projected at and then what we had them at on the board. For JRs, it was almost an entire green difference between where I had them projected and then the board had them projected. Even for fairways, it was about like 0.4 fairways between what I had them projected at and then what they did. Today, it's the opposite. It's like they have them projected for more birdies, more greens than I have them projected for across the board. So it's almost like they've overcompensated here. I mean, they have Sahith Theegala guys at 5.5 birdies. We had guys like Scotty Scheffler, for example, right? World #1 player in the world at the Travelers at 5 birdies. Now we have Sahith Theegala at 5.5. Like, are you kidding me? Like, these numbers seem a lot higher than they should be. I mean, JT posted 5.5, Emiliano Grillo 5.5. I know a lot of these guys beat that score today, but that's because they're at the top of the leaderboard. That's because they had ceiling performances today. And frankly, to expect that to happen day after day it's a tough task. But are you really going to fade them is the question, right? Because we're expecting this to play 2 strokes under par. There are some really gettable holes around this golf course. So it's, just as hard as it is to take the over on these guys on birdies, it's almost just as hard to fade them. I mean, I think they're almost appropriate here. So for me, there's not a ton of value here on the birdie or better board. For greens, you can see they have them at 13.5. A lot of the elite tier players. Now I'm a little bit more willing to fade guys here, particularly some of the less solid iron players. I mean, JT posting the leader at 14 greens. That seems like a solid spot to take an under at. I mean, we've had John Rahm at the Travelers, and that was at a golf course with extremely receptive greens, over a 73% GIR percentage at 13.5 in terms of a projection. 14 greens. Like, I understand the wind has died down. We talked about this a little bit earlier, right? 5 to 7 miles an hour here on Saturday. I don't care. 14 greens is something that's hard to do. I mean, to hit the over and screw us here, he has to only miss 3 greens out of 18. I mean, even when you're putting up a 7 to 8 under round, usually you miss more than 4 to 5 greens. Artaban Lahiri today shot 6 under par. He missed 6 greens. He only hit 12 on the day. That just should tell you how outrageous some of these GIR lines are. So my favorite prop here is the GIR bar, and it's taking the under. So like on somebody like a JT Poston, I'd be taking the under there. No, Emiliano Grillo is a great iron player. Maybe don't fade that one, but Charles Howell III at 14, that seems a little bit aggressive. McNeely at 13.5, that sure seems aggressive. Pretty much everyone on this board, I mean, especially Zach Johnson here at 13.5, I'd be smashing the unders on. And even if they hit the under here, they could still shoot 4 to 5 under par. That would not surprise me. They could still make the 4 to 5 birdies they need to hit the prop here or end up pushing at 5 birdies. That wouldn't surprise me. But for the greens board, I think it's extremely aggressive. I mean, guys, we had guys at 11.5 to 12 greens yesterday. I mean, that's why we were trying to smash the overs on this board. I know it doesn't seem like a massive difference, right? Just 1.5, sometimes 2 greens difference between the 2 days. But in golf, that is an unbelievably, massive difference, especially when you're looking at range of outcomes. A 0.5 difference, you're looking at like a 7.5% difference in terms of ROI. So a lot of times when people are asking me, like, oh, this got bumped by 0.5, went from 13.5 to 14, would you still take it? The answer is always, it depends, right? It depends on your actual hit percentage. Now, if it was one of my favorite props, let's say it was like a 65% hit rate, and then it moved up 0.5, I'd still probably take it because it's like a 58 57% hit rate, not all that bad. But if it was just a lean, right, something where I thought it was just an okay prop, maybe like my fourth or fifth prop in, then certainly I'd be fading that prop. So, understand that it doesn't look all that much different between the two rounds here, but this is a massively different board, a board that I'm actually trying to fade. So with birdies, again, I'm probably just not playing any of these because, like I said, I could easily see them going over. But if I was going to play these, I'd be taking fades. I'd be taking fades on guys at 5.5, maybe like a JT Poston that I just don't think has another ceiling performance. You could go down to the bottom of the board like CH3, Emiliano Grillo. Like I know they had really good rounds today. From a long-term sample size, they're not making 6 birdies all that often. They're averaging closer to like 4.2 birdies. And even on a birdie fest golf course, it's really hard to project them for more than 5.5 birdies. I mean, most of these guys have projected for closer to like 4.8, 4.9 birdies, which is more than half a birdie difference than where I haven't projected. Let's take a look at fairways hit. They're also juiced up. I mean, you had Todd here at 11 fairways, which just seems ridiculous. I mean, at one point we had a Rory McIlroy line where he was at 11 fairways hit, and that was pretty much a free square for us, right? And obviously, Brendan Todd, a little bit more accurate off the tee, so it's not nearly the free square as what we had with Rory McIlroy, but I'd slam the under there. You kidding me? He only has 3 fairways to work with. There's a drivable par 4. There's a few long par 5s. Not every fairway is super wide around TPC Deere Run. I mean, you'd be smashing the under there. The guys at 10 seem fair. I'd be taking the under on Poston. 10.5 for Grillo seems aggressive. I mean, even 9.5 and 9 for some of these guys is it's aggressive. There's only 14 fairways, right? It's not like greens where you have 18 greens to hit. You only have 14 fairways to hit. So it's a little bit of a different process there. Birdie or better matchup might be the easiest board to target just because you don't have to worry about whether lines are too high or too low. It's all about whether you like one player or the other. So we'll go matchup by matchup. First off, this is a Sahith Theegala versus Sabatini matchup. It's an obvious over, right? Sahith Theegala should be the favorite there. Now, do we think it's a massive edge, something that you absolutely have to smash? No, I don't think it's my favorite prop on the board, but I definitely think it's a lean towards Sahith there. You have Christian Bezuidenhout versus Callum Turan. Now, Turan had a ceiling performance today. Same thing with Bezuidenhout, but kind of like the first matchup there, it's a lean towards Bez. Bez, a great putter, has exactly what I'm looking for this week. And Turan, a little bit more volatile, right? Shows up from time to time. We'll see him as a first-round leader. He showed up at the U.S. Open for a round or two and then completely fell off the board. So obviously, if he has one of those downer performances, Christian Bezuidenhout's high floor, a little bit of a safer mindset. He's a great cash play when it comes to DFS. He's extremely consistent, is what we're looking for in these 50-50 type of matchups. All right, next up, you've got Maverick McNeely versus Scott Stallings. For me, this is a fade. I like both sides. I think both of them could go out there and make a lot of birdies. So that's not something I'd take one or the other on. Lahiri versus Wu, that's clearly towards Lahiri. In fact, that's one of my favorite PGA props on the board. McCarthy versus Davis is another fade. 2 players I think have a very solid day tomorrow. Poston versus Hardy. In fact, I take the under here towards Hardy. I think Hardy is just as much upside. I mean, both players, extremely young players that have plenty of potential on tour, but more importantly, right, JT Poston is due for some negative regression. I mean, it's really rare we see 2 ceiling performances in a row, but even more rare to see 3 in a row. And on the other side, you have Nick Hardy, who just couldn't buy a putt today. He was extremely unlucky, could have easily been 4 to 5 strokes better. And though he had a decent round to make the cut, I think he's going to have a ceiling round in him soon. So I'd take the under on this matchup right here. You have Howell III versus Whaley. I mean, I'd lean towards Charles Howell III, but that's not a smash spot for me. Grillo versus CT Pan. I think that's another really close matchup. Probably not anything there's too much value on there. This Johnson versus Malnati group, guys, this is a trap waiting to happen. I know a lot of people are like, oh, Peter Malnati, who's that? That's a madman, somebody who makes a lot more birdies than his peers. So I probably wouldn't touch that matchup there. You have Todd versus Lipsky. God, that's another good matchup. I love both of those players. That's probably another fade there. Fratelli versus Buckley, that's the over on Fratelli. I definitely like the over there. And with Kazire versus Schwab, that's another close matchup, but I'd take Kazire there. Schwab had a solid day today, but historically, Kazire is a higher birdie or better percentage player. So that's for the birdie board. We talked about birdie better, greens and fairways. For strokes, I don't think it's the worst board either. So, kind of like I said with birdies, they completely overreacted. With greens, they completely overreacted to what we saw today. With strokes, it's kind of similar to what we saw. Now it's like, half a stroke, maybe a stroke difference than what we saw yesterday. But in terms of like percentage chance of hitting, I think they have a little bit more edge here. So we'll talk through it. I wouldn't touch anyone at 67.5. I'm not betting on anybody to shoot -3 or better. I'm a little bit more comfortable about the guys at 68. So a few that I want to point out. First, Bazane Hoot, who's extremely consistent. Now, he's not going to shoot 6 to 7 under par very often, which he did today, right? He had that ceiling performance, but what he's kind of known for is shooting 3 under par every single day, just playing a little bit better than average. He gains across all 4 stat categories when it comes to his shots gained metrics. And in general, I like taking him in for props because, for the 50-50 prop with matchups, for strokes where you're just asking him to shoot 2 under par to push, 3 under par to hit, I'm trying to take him in these type of formats. So I like Bazane Hoot quite a bit here. Lahiri, I'd consider taking at 68 strokes. And towards the bottom of the board, Brendan Todd at 68. I don't hate all that much, but I would definitely try to stick to Bazane Hoot and Lahiri when it came to strokes. Those would certainly be my favorites on the board, and I would be slamming the under on both of them. So we've talked through the prize picks board. Let's go ahead and talk about LIV Golf. And actually, let's talk about some questions before we hop into LIV Golf. We'll talk about the prize picks board, see if there's any questions down there. We've got David who says the Bez matchup looks really good to me based on day 3 performance and this tournament. Would love to get your thoughts. So yeah, I completely agree with you there. I think Bazane Hoot makes a lot of sense versus Tran. Tran's very volatile. Like I said, he's kind of up and down. We'll go out there, make 4 or 5 birdies on a round, and then make 1 or 2. Bazane Hoot is like at least making 3 tomorrow, like dead ass, like at least making 3. More likely like 4 to 5 birdies on the day. And from the 50-50 standpoint, like you're getting here in a matchup, yeah, dude, I think that's absolute money. So I'm in lockstep with you, David. I think that's one of my favorite props there. Frank says that's because they see if it was too easy, then they be keeping lines tighter than a wedgie. I told Degenerate that they need to give us a 1 to 1.5 edge because they aren't giving us too many breaks. Yeah, I agree, dude. They're trying to be a little bit tighter with the lines. That's why you're getting these birdie lines, right? 5.5 birdies, 5 birdies across the board with greens. A solid 1 to 1.5 higher than what we had the day before. They're reacting to try and make the board a little bit more accurate. But what they're forgetting about is I think they're overdoing it, right? They went from like 11.5, 12 to 13, 13.5. That's a 1.5 difference in the other direction. So, while yesterday was projecting them for close to like what was it, like 13.1 fairways for somebody like Hadman, 13.1 for somebody who likes to hit the gala. Now the value's on the under, but I don't think there's that much value, right? That's why I'm kind of avoiding the birdie or better props. That's why I'm avoiding the greens and regulation props and trying to focus on the birdie or better matchups, which you can kind of get away with that a little bit more than the strokes props, like I said, that I think are a little bit more straightforward. Max House says, do you like Zach Johnson for Showdown? So I don't like him. I'll say that. I think that his ball striking kind of lowers his upside because he's not going to hit a bunch of shots to 5 to 6 feet. For him to hit his ceiling, he's going to have to make a bunch of 20 to 30 footers. So if you're playing at a smaller field GPP, if you're playing in cash, I'm okay with Zach Johnson. In fact, I think he's a pretty solid option in those fields. But if you're playing to win the $50,000 contest, you're playing in a contest with, let's say, at least 2,000 entries, then I think he starts to lose his luster there because I don't think he has that 7 to 8 under round in him. But I do project him to shoot close to like 2.5, 3 under par tomorrow. So I don't think he's the worst play in human history. Let's move into the LIV Golf board now. Talk about what we expect to see here, which frankly, guys, today was pretty solid. We have ourselves a leaderboard, right? So let's take a look at it on here. I got Dustin Johnson up top, obviously top 10 player in the world. Carlos Ortiz is tied. Brendan Grace is an absolute killer in the LIV Golf Tour. I believe finished top 10 last week, finished on the Stingers, who was the winner in the first event there in London, and is up there in the top 3 at this point. So when it comes to Showdown over here for LIV, and I think this is maybe the thing to start with, there's no placement points here for Sunday. So for Sunday Showdown and prize picks, or not prize picks, sorry, PGA, getting ahead of myself here, guys, we get points for where they finish. For the Live Tour, we don't. And this obviously is their final round. So it even says final round finale, right? So like DraftKings didn't forget about it. They didn't forget the fact that this is their final round. There's no placement points. If you scroll this, there's none to speak of there. So you're just looking at your normal points for eagles, birdies, that sort of thing, streaks, bogey-free rounds, hole-in-ones, like what we saw for Patrick Rogers today, which I was not expecting. I thought we were going to get a similar structure to what we see for PGA, which God knows what reason they're changing it up, right? It should be the same thing for the European Tour. They still give placement points for Sunday Showdown, but for God knows what reason, guys, there are no Showdown points for placement. So just understand that when it comes to the stuff here on Sunday. In general, though, let's talk through my favorite plays. So we're just going to worry about upside. We're looking for players to shoot 4, maybe 5 under par tomorrow. And the whole short player narrative was kind of dispelled today. So obviously, I like to admit when I'm wrong. And I think from the skill set perspective, I might have been wrong yesterday because a lot of the shorter hitters that played well on day one, they had decent performances today. So from a floor perspective, a lot of them shot like even par or 1 under par, but the ceiling performances were really a majority from the players that were long off the tee. So if we sort this by round 2 score, which God knows, I hope we can do this year. Might not be able to because this is the Live Tour. They're new to this. You'll see that it's longer players, right? Justin Harding, a lot longer than his peers. Dustin Johnson had a really solid day. He shot a 68. Patrick Reed shot 68. He's a solid putter. Bryson had a decent day, shot 69. What did Wolf shoot? Wolf shot 71. So he shot -1 today. That was decent, right? Obviously, guys like Bryson that shot multiple under par, a little bit better. But you can see a lot of the longer players like a Horsfield played well. Gooch shot under par. Moving down a little bit further, Matt Jones shot even par. He's relatively long. The guys up here in the top half of the leaderboard, outside of a few notable exceptions, are long off the tee, right? Louis, maybe a little bit more accurate, but he's not super short off the tee. Kim here, he's relatively short, so I'll give him that. Pat Perez, also a relatively short player, and Martin Keimer. But outside of those 3 players, looking at bombers, but even Carlos Ortiz, relatively long off the tee. So I don't want to look into it too much. The fact of the matter is these guys are high birdie percentage players, like Dustin Johnson, right? Makes plenty of birdies. Carlos Ortiz, an absolute madman out there. Brooks Koepka, an aggressive player. Louis Oosthuizen, because of his putting ability, makes birdies in bunches. So I think when it comes to the Showdown perspective, we should just lean on what we usually do, right? Which is take aggressive players. Take guys that can get hot with the flat stick. And because this is Sunday Showdown, right? Or I should say, quote unquote, Sunday Showdown, when it comes to the round 3 of the Live here, let's just fade the guys up top. You're not getting placement points, right? So DJ, he's probably going to be like 40% owned tomorrow. Carlos Ortiz, 2 solid rounds in a row. He's probably going to be 30% owned, something in that range. Brooks Koepka probably going to be like 25% owned. Louis probably going to be like 30% owned. I think if you just fade everyone that's T5 or better, so obviously Kim, maybe you don't have to fade him, right? Kazuma, maybe you don't have to fade him, but Reed, Oosthuizen, Koepka, Harding, Grace, Ortiz, Johnson, just fade all of these players and then take pivots because first off, they don't have nearly the incentive to go low tomorrow. They might shoot 1 to 2 under par, but if you're playing in the large field GPP when it comes to Live Golf, you're going to need at least 3 under par from all of your players. You're going to need at least a 68, right? Because if we look at the board here, let's see how many 68s we had. We had 1 today, 2 68s or better, 3, 4, let's see, 5. So at least 5. So we had 5, right? So maybe you'll get away with one of your 6 players not shooting a 68 or better, right? Better be 69, right? Because there's plenty of players that shot 2 under par 69. You're going to need at least 3 under par or better. You need guys that are going to put up birdies on their round. And obviously, if somebody goes out there like DJ today and just makes birdies and bunches, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He made 8 birdies on the day. You're absolutely going to have him in lineup. So what I'm going to do here, guys, is I'm going to fade the chalk up top, right? Because obviously when it comes to Showdown, you want to do so, but I'm just going to take a high upside player. So when we hop over here to the player pool, I guess we'll look at the weather too. It's worth taking a look at. This is the same weather station we looked at for today where weather was pretty much non-existent. It's the same story. That's why I don't want to look at it all too much. It's just 5 to 8 miles an hour, nothing to speak of in terms of wind gusts. So expect very similar conditions to what we had today. So I'm going to sort this by score, just look through some of the chalk. Like I said, obviously DJ Ortiz should be relatively chalky. I think you're going to see plenty of ownership on the other guys in the AK range, like a Brendan Grace and a Justin Harding. You have Kepka and Louis that are also up top. So you can see a majority of this chalk, guys, is 8K plus, guys at the top of the board. So who are the guys that I'm taking as a substitute? So first and foremost, Taylor Gooch, right? Taylor Gooch, he's -2 to this point. So he's not really towards the top of the leaderboard, but he's clearly been playing solid golf. Same thing with Abraham Answer, who today ended up making 3 birdies, which wasn't ideal for showdown purposes. Also for prize picks, didn't end up hitting the over for us. He was one of the 2 out of the 16 props today that we didn't end up hitting. I like getting to these type of players. They're going to be a third, maybe a fourth owned as everyone else around them. I mean, like I said, DJ is probably going to be like 40% owned. You're looking at like 30, maybe 25% at the very least on guys like a Kepka and Oosthuizen. Whereas guys like Taylor Gooch, Answer, you're going to see single-digit potential ownership on both of those players. So I mean, look at them too. They're 2 shots back, right? And you're not getting placement points. So you're talking about a player who's not playing all that much worse than the guys that are going to be 3 times more owned. Sign me up all day, right? More often than not, it might not work for tomorrow's slate, but if you do this for every slate when it comes to Showdown, I guarantee you by the end of the year, you're winning, because more often than not, right? You can't say that Taylor Gooch is 4 times less likely than any of these players to succeed. It's a 1-round sample size, and you're talking about a player who's cheaper than them. So you can obviously spend more money on other players as a result of pivoting to him, and just another high birdie percentage player. Taylor Gooch is a top 50 player in the world for a reason. Abraham Answer, top 50 player in the world for a reason, right? They're not all that different than the guys up top. So I'll be pivoting to some of those lower owned options. I think Bryson, he'll be a little bit chalky. People love playing Bryson. I think he'll be like 25% owned, but I'll be there once again. He paid off today. Sam Horsfield I'll be getting to. Duplessis will finally be lower owned than he should be. He was chalked the first 2 days, but now that he's +1, I think he'll be a little bit overlooked. Moving down to the 8K range, or at least the bottom of it, I think Matt Jones worth a few looks. Matthew Wolff has played decent. He made 5 birdies today. Towards the 7K range, Ortiz is going to be mega chalk. Probably want to fade that. Uline worth a few looks. Laurie Cantor is a great up-and-coming player from the DP World Tour. Hudson Swafford, I know he's had a bad tournament so far, but we know him. He can get hot in a hurry. Sean Norris, a great putter, probably worth a few looks at $7,400. Towards the middle, or I should say bottom of the 7K range at this point, it really starts to tail off. So Lee Westwood, probably not the worst pick. We've seen Lee Westwood have some ceiling performances over the last few years. Chase Koepka +3, right? Meh. I think he's just a meh play there. Moving down to the 6K range, there's not many options. So one thing they've done with the pricing here, guys, and kind of the reason why I like starting with Gooch and starting with guys like Answer, is the 6K range sucks. Let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 of the 54 players are in the 6K range, whereas on most PGA DFS slates, like 30 to 40% of the player pool is there down in the 6K range. In this case, it's closer to 20%, 25%. They're down here in the 6K. It's a harder slate to play studs and duds, right? It's really hard to take guys like a DJ, Andrew Brooks, Koepka together. And frankly, I don't like a lot of these plays. I'd take Turk Pettit. I think he's worth a few shots. Rakuya Kineshita, probably also worth a few looks. Jediah Morgan, he's played horribly to this point. He's +16. Holy shit. He's in last place, but Jediah Morgan is a lot better than people are giving him credit for. So there's a few guys that you can maybe take a few flyer shots on, but because of the pricing, it's hard to take 2 studs. So that's why I like starting with Taylor Gooch even more. In terms of making a lineup, I'm not going to make one here with you because it is against the terms of service. But you could take a Taylor Gooch, go to a Sam Horsfield as your next man in. Kind of live in the 8K range. I don't hate Kevin Na. I don't hate taking Duplessis, who I talked about before. And then you have $7,300 or $72,500 remaining for your last 2 spots. You don't have to go down to guys at like $6,300, like a Windred. You don't have to take guys at $6,100, right? Like a Jediah Morgan. Whereas, if we were going to get more aggressive about it, try and take DJ, try and take maybe Answer as our next man in, you only have $6,400 remaining. You're going to have to take one of these really ugly names down low. And, I kind of went on my soapbox yesterday and mentioned that a lot of these players are a lot better than people give them credit for. And while that's true, we don't have that many options to choose from here, right? Like I said, there's 9 options down here in the 6K range. There's not even that many to choose from, and most of them are pretty dog shit. And again, the only ones I'd really take a look at in that 6K range, I'd take Kinoshita, I'd take Chikara. Chikara is a young stud from Oklahoma State. Turk Pettit, probably not the worst play, and Jediah Morgan. But outside of these four in the 6K range, it's real rough sailing. You probably don't want to play any of the other guys down there in the 6K range. So we'll catch up on chat, see what's going on with in terms of questions before we hop into the prize picks board, see what's going on. We got Ryan who says, actually, we got a question about James Hahn. We'll talk about first. Would you be willing to go back to James Hahn? I would be. He's a high upside play. Clearly has to get the putter working. He's one of the more inconsistent putters that we see on the tour, but he's a high upside play, particularly in this strength of field. So I like it. How? I don't think it's the worst question. Ryan says, newbie question. What do you mean by fade? So for fade, we were talking about prize picks when we talked about that. It means not play it. So just in DFS, if I'm fading somebody, it means I'm not playing them in my lineups. If I'm talking about fading a prop, it means I'm just not touching the board in general. So if I'm talking about fading the birdie or better props, fading the GIR props, it means just not playing them for the over or the under. I think that they're a relatively fair price. Obviously in DFS, a little bit of a different context there. It just means I'm not playing them. So good question there, Ryan. It's a little bit different based on the contest. Jeff says, who would be your pick to win besides Poston, obviously? So, it's a good question. I mean, McCarthy would be the obvious answer, right? Because he's your guy in second place there. But if you're talking about somebody at like 7 to 8 under par, I think Scott Stallings, given his upside, is worth a few looks. And then Maverick McNeely, I kind of called it yesterday. He shot 1 under par the first day, but I said he had winning upside because of the putter that we saw round one. I'm going to stick behind that. You obviously saw that today, but the ball striking was what turned around for him today. So if he continues that for rounds 3 and round 4, watch out. I mean, he could win this, that's for sure. Even being, like 7 to 8 strokes back at this point. Jason says fade equals not play. Definitely agree. That's for sure there. So we'll hop over to prize picks and wrap this thing up, guys. So we're going to talk through my favorite prize picks for the LIV Tour event. If you do have any questions, and this could be for anything at this point, so if you're talking about John Deere Showdown, John Deere prize picks, or anything for the LIV Tour, feel free to go ahead and put them down in chat. And when we're done with this, we'll go ahead and touch on them. So let's go ahead and go through this LIV Tour stuff. Alrighty, so we've got 3 categories. We've got birdie or better matchups, which you love to see, which I think the LIV Tour is probably going to be our best bet. Then we have strokes, and then we have birdie or better. Much like the John Deere board, they've juiced these guys up, right? So Phil Mickelson was at 2.5 yesterday, right? He's at 3 now. Matthew Wolff was at 3.5. We obviously took the over at 3.5, and he hit today. Charles Schwartzel was at 3.5. We took the over, and he hit at 4 today. Why would we take them at over at 4? Do we really think they're going to get to 5? I mean, just no. I mean, just this board here, same thing at the PGA. It's unfortunate, but they priced it a lot better today than they have in the past. I mean, even Bryson, right? He's at 4.5 birdies now. The damn guy was at 3.5 yesterday. I mean, good on prize picks for sharpening up their picks here, but maybe we just take unders now, right? Maybe we start to slam the other side. So for guys like Brooks Koepka at 5, I would definitely take the under on his ass. I mean, I like Brooks Koepka. He's one of the West Palm Beach boys, as I say, from down here that I've actually played golf with. He's played in a few charity tournaments I've played with down here. I'd be fading him there. 5 birdies is too much. Bryson at 4.5, I'd be fading his ass too. Just they seem to overreact when they get slammed on props one day to kind of protect themselves from it the next day. And guys, we're not dumb. We're not dumbasses who are just gonna be like, oh, slam the overs again. The overs hit today, so let's take the overs again tomorrow. They're 1.5 fucking birdies higher. I mean, Brooks is a 4 yesterday. Like I said, Bryson was an entire birdie lower. We're not peons. We're not fucking idiots out there. And obviously, if the lines maker's in the chat, we're not dumbasses. We're not just going to slam the overs again for the hell of it. Think intelligently. So with the birdies board, kind of like we saw with the other one, I don't think you have to be taking the overs here. It's kind of a fade for me. I don't think many of them are that attractive. But I consider taking the under on Bryson. I take the under on Brooks Koepka there at 5 birdies. Outside of that, the under on Perez doesn't seem all that unattractive. I think at most he makes 4 birdies here. And even the under on Phil Mickelson, right? He was 2.5 birdies the day before for a reason. He's in bad form at 3.5 birdies now. I'm trying to take the other side of that. So I'd be taking fades here on the birdie board with strokes. it's not nearly as attractive because this is a par 72. I would still be trying to fade players here, but I think they're a lot more appropriately priced. So Carlos Ortiz over 70, I consider that. I don't think he shoots 3 under par or better. Dustin Johnson at 69 strokes is probably a fade, probably not something I'm taking there. But outside of this Carlos Ortiz prop, it's not really anything I'm looking to take. Maybe Graham McDowell over 72 and a half. He hasn't been playing his best golf here in the LIV Tour. You can consider taking that one, or even Phil 73 and a half. I'd consider taking the over there too. I know he made some birdies today, but he also wasn't all that sharp with the rest of his play. Made plenty of bogeys on the day. And based on, him and McDowell's stats to this point on the LIV Tour, they seem to be the lowest quality players. But perhaps my favorite market when it comes to LIV Tour is going to be the birdie or better matchup board. So let's talk through some of these. First off, the DJ versus Gooch prop. I think that's extremely close. I'd be taking the over on Grace here. So even though I think Brooks makes less than 4.5 birdies, right? Less than 5 birdies. I think he makes maybe 4 on the day. I'd take the over against Grace because Brendan Grace, guys, is a dog shit putter. He's one of the worst flat sticks you're going to find on all of the PGA Tour. So in a 50-50 scenario, I take the over on Brooks. So I know it's a little bit counterintuitive, but I definitely think he makes more birdies than Brendan Grace. Just the matchup is a little bit mispriced, in my opinion there. You have Answer versus Matt Jones. I think that's a close one. I'd probably fade it. Same thing with Bryson versus Louis. I think it's a relatively close prop there. You have Reed versus Garcia. That's another fade. That's another close prop. You have the putter versus the hot ball striking. That's a fade. I would take the Lee Westwood side versus Phil. That's for sure. Even though Lee Westwood getting up there in age, he is certainly better than Phil Mickelson at this point. Poulter versus Keimer. Ooh, that's probably a fade too. I would lean towards the Poulter side there. McDowell versus Uline. That's Uline all day. This is a great prop right here. This Uline matchup against McDowell is an absolute smash. Vincent versus Perez. That's another close one. Wolf versus Horsfield. That's another under towards Horsfield, but it's another close one. And then Ortiz versus Kevin Na. It's Kevin Na all day. Now, I know Carlos Ortiz is winning this golf tournament, or at least tied for first at this point. But from a long-term sample size, Kevin Na is a lot better player than Carlos Ortiz. Right? Let's not kid ourselves here. From a long-term sample size, looking at least a half a stroke, maybe even a stroke difference between the shots gained metrics. So those would be some of the matchup props I'm looking at. Again, that Brendan Grace prop doesn't look all that bad for Brooks Koepka. Like I said, the Patrick Reed versus Garcia is a pretty close one. Maybe lean towards Patrick Reed there. But the main props I like for this are the birdie or better unders. Like I said, Brooks Koepka under, Bryson DeChambeau under, potentially even some of the guys here at 4, like a Pat Perez I mentioned before, Phil Mickelson that's here at 3.5. These lines are just too high. It's a long golf course. It's not an easy golf course. The greens are running relatively fast. It looks like close to a 12 and a half on the Stimpmeter. And they're also relatively small greens. They're right around like 4,500 square foot per green, at least per what they said on the broadcast. So relatively small greens there. I think that they've over adjusted, kind of like they did over here for the PGA props, where a lot of the birdie or better lines, like 5.5 is hit. Like, are you like 5.5 guys? These are reserved for like the world number 1 players in the world. Like Scotty Scheffler at the Travelers Championship was 5.5 for Saturday's round because you had easy weather, you had easy pin locations, and it's the damn number 1 player in the world. Tomorrow, it's like average weather, right? It's not like amazing pin locations. They're actually pretty difficult. If you take a look at the pin sheet there, and it's guys like Sahith Theegala, Maverick McNeely, and Denny McCarthy are like 50 through 100 in the world golf rankings. Just ridiculous to me. So for the price pick side, it is certainly going to be quite a few fades. We'll catch up on chat before we hop on out of here. So we've got Frankie says, at this point, we might as well fade them all. Yeah, I agree, dude. It's just a ridiculous board. Everything's been priced up, that's for sure. And Frank says the lines makers are trying to get us to go over and find a way for us to go for pushes. Yeah, dude. That's what I'm saying, like to fade these guys that are super up there. I mean, like if anything, take unders, right? Because it seems like a trap. I mean, you have Dustin Johnson here at 5. I consider taking the under there, even though he's a high quality player. It just seems like everything is mispriced. Maybe be like half a birdie or half a stroke or whatnot. Even on the birdie board, Sahith should be at like 5. Christian Bazinu should be like 4.5 birdies. McNeely should be like 4.5 birdies in terms of his projection. JT Poston should be 5 at the very most. it's just a trap board and a half, Frank. That's for sure. So I certainly agree with you there. And says, I tell everywhere here, if you don't fade someone, then that's on you. Definitely, dude. You, especially tomorrow, I think it's definitely a fade board and a half. You want to take a look at some of the unders there. So that's all I've got here for round 3. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the live stream. We will be doing the same thing for round 4. So that'll be tomorrow night, a little bit earlier than what we had here today. I had a little bit of a family outing. I had to get out with the parents for a little bit of wine, some dinner and whatnot. But tomorrow, gonna be home, getting ownership, getting projections done a little bit earlier. So I expect like 9:30, 10 p.m. Eastern time at the very latest for the start of the stream. So look forward to that. And that will be for PGA only. Obviously, no Sunday Showdown when it comes to LIV Golf, just a 3-round event. So maybe a little bit easier to get through the field. But more importantly, we have placement points at play. Obviously, a lot more strategy when it comes to the Showdown side of things. So a lot to break down and a lot that I'm looking forward to. So best of luck with your lineups. Make sure you smash that like button before you hop on out of here if you haven't already. And if you aren't already subscribed to the channel, I would highly recommend you do that too. That way you don't miss any of the content in the future. We will be covering the Scottish Open next week, also covering the JP McManus Pro-Am, and 2 weeks from now, we've got the Open Championship. So a lot of content you don't want to miss. And as per usual, going to have you covered from all angles. So I appreciate the support here, guys. If you haven't already joined the Patreon, make sure you check that out too for full projections. And I'll see you guys for tomorrow.